Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So this video is a quick prediction and preview for Dereck Chisora versus Kubrat Pulev 2. Of course, Pulev won their first fight by split decision in May of 2016. The fight takes place at the O2 Arena in London, takes place on the 9th of July and will be televised on DAZN, both in the USA and the UK. Now, when this fight was first announced, I'll be honest, I was very surprised. All the noise at the time was that Dereck Chisora was going to fight Adam Kownacki, and that was a fight I liked. But Adam Kownacki went in a different direction, and then they drafted in Kubrat Pulev to be Dereck Chisora's opponent. And yeah, the fight really took me by surprise because ultimately, it's not really a fight that needed a rematch. First and foremost, the first fight in 2016 was relatively boring. Although on paper, it was a split decision, it was a fight in which Kubrat Pulev clearly won in my opinion. He really controlled Dereck Chisora throughout the 12 rounds and primarily outboxed him by picking him off with a jab, landing single shots and tying up. It was an uneventful fight from what I can remember. So yeah, the rematch to me doesn't really make all that much sense considering how the first fight went. However, both guys are significantly older now, coming towards the end of their careers. They're not the fighters they once were, so potentially that might make this a much better fight than the first fight, here's hoping. But anyway, let's briefly go through the tale of the tape, and we shall start with Dereck Chisora. Dereck Chisora has a record of 32 wins, 12 defeats, 23 of his 32 wins coming by way of knockout. Kubrat Pulev has a record of 29 wins, 2 defeats, 14 of his 29 wins coming by way of knockout. Dereck Chisora is listed as 6'1.5" with a 74-inch reach, whereas Kubrat Pulev is listed as 6'4.5" with a 79.5-inch reach. So Pulev is the taller and longer man. He's got a 3-inch height advantage and a 5.5-inch reach advantage, and that can certainly play a factor on fight night. It certainly did first time around. Both of these guys are elder statesmen in the heavyweight division. Dereck Chisora is 38 years old, whereas Kubrat Pulev is 41 years old. You know, both of these guys have been around a long time. Pulev had a very long amateur career. Chisora's taken a lot of punishment in the pros. I wouldn't really pay too much attention to the ages of both men. It's really down to who's got more in the tank at the end of the day. Both of these guys have seen better days, as we know. Dereck Chisora, of course, is an orthodox fighter, as is Kubrat Pulev. Now the tale of the tape is out of the way, let's briefly break down what I believe each guy should do to win. And I think I'll start with Dereck Chisora because, you know, based on that first fight, he's the guy who needs to make changes going into this rematch. One thing about the first fight was that Dereck Chisora did a very bad job of gauging the distance against Kubrat Pulev, and what I mean by that, he was very often lunging in out of range with big looping shots, and he would fall in, which would give Kubrat Pulev the opportunity to either clinch him, time him with a jab, then clinch him, or time him with the right hand and then clinch him. Chisora in that first fight was overshooting, and he was falling into the clinch and falling into counters. This time around, Dereck Chisora needs to be working off that jab. And listen, Chisora is not going to win a jab battle with Kubrat Pulev. That's not the point here. But Dereck Chisora, he's going to be the aggressor in this fight, and he needs to be throwing that jab out there, not even necessarily to score points or anything like that, but he needs to utilize that jab as almost an antenna, like a rangefinder, to work out when he can throw punches, you know, prod and probe, touch, 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 and then fire. As we saw in the first fight, Dereck, he can't be too far out when he throws his power shots, or he's just going to fall into a clinch, and he can't be too close, as again, Dereck will more than likely smother himself and then allow Pulev to tie him up. And that's one thing we saw in that first fight. Pulev dealt with Dereck Chisora's strength very well. So yeah, Dereck needs to be conscious of distance when he's setting up these attacks, because Pulev can be a real spoiler. If you give him the opportunity to clinch you, he will do, and that will happen in this rematch. So unlike the first fight, when Dereck was in the clinch, he wasn't really doing much, you know. Usually Dereck will try and get rough in the clinch, he'll try and rough you up, throw shots over the top, you know, try to work his free hand. But in that first fight, he wasn't really doing it that much. And that is definitely something he needs to do in this second fight, you know. He can't allow Pulev to think that the clinch is his safe haven where nothing's going to happen, he's not going to get tested. Dereck needs to test Pulev in the clinch. With his strength, he needs to try and get that free hand going and make that clinch uncomfortable, because if that clinch isn't uncomfortable for Pulev, he'll do it all night. And, you know, Dereck definitely needs to be aware of that. Another area in this fight in which Dereck needs to be more conscious of is his fight planning. And what I mean by that, don't go too hard too early. Because if we watched Dereck's fights recently with Joseph Parker, particularly in the first fight, and Alexander Usyk, he started both of those fights extremely quickly. And, you know, he tried to put a lot of pressure on early on. And if you look at those fights, Dereck tailed off drastically after the third, fourth round in both fights. And if he does that against Pulev, Pulev could very easily pick him off from range with that jab and just pile up the points, you know. Dereck can't be plodding and kind of labouring forwards, not really throwing much, because at that point, if Chisora turns into a plodder, then he's just going to get picked off with that jab. So for me, Dereck needs to be careful of not doing too much too early, you know, save himself for the later rounds. Again, not box with Pulev or anything like that, but try to be a little more economical with that pressure. We know he's going to be the guy walking forwards, we know he's going to be the guy applying pressure, but, you know, don't throw so many wasted shots kind of thing. Because against a surgical, precise guy like Pulev, if you do that and you don't get him out of there, you're going to be tired, whereas he's still going to have energy, he's still going to pick you off with that economical and straight punching style. And lastly, you know, I'd like to see Dereck try to work the body of Kubrat Pulev in this fight. Dereck is a good body puncher when he actually focuses on the body, but it's something in which he doesn't always focus on. So in this fight with Pulev, I mean, test that body out, test his heart. I mean, Pulev is 41 years old, you know, he's not going to be around for much longer, so try to test that heart, try to test that cardio, see if he wants it anymore, that kind of thing, you know. The body work of Chisora could be very important for him in this particular bout. But ultimately it's down to Dereck to apply pressure in this fight, but he needs to go about it in a much smarter way than he did in the first fight, no doubt about it. As for Kubrat Pulev, again, we know Pulev's style by now, we've seen enough of him. He's a guy who likes to lean back, get behind that jab, prod and probe with the lead hand, and he'll fire that jab, and occasionally he'll fire the straight right hand behind it. He's quite an upright guy, he likes to maintain range, he's a 1-2 type of guy. Occasionally he'll mix in a right uppercut or a left hook, but primarily Kubrat Pulev is a 1-2 type of guy. Again, that half step back, keeping distance, that's what he does. He's a poor man's Vladimir Klitschko in a sense. And ultimately, you know, Pulev needs to do what he does best, and that is box behind that jab, those straight punches. He needs to be picking off Chisora as he's coming in, which he did in the first fight. Now, unlike the first fight, this second fight is in Chisora's backyard. It's in his hometown. Pulev is the B-side this time around, so I think he needs to be a little more active than he usually is, and primarily be more active with that jab. And not only be active with the jab, try to keep Dereck at range, but throw some feints in there. Pulev is pretty good at hand feints and shoulder feints, things like that. Try to draw the lead of Dereck Chisora. Try to get Chisora to commit with one of those lunging overhands and try to counter it with the right hand. Because Dereck is definitely open for those straight shots. Again, primarily, most of his power shots are crooked arm punches, and he'll really square up as he lunges and loads up with those shots. So the straight punches of Pulev will be very effective if he utilises counterpunching. As we know, a good straight shot will always get to the target before a wide looping shot. So yeah, Pulev needs to try to read Chisora and punch with Chisora on Chisora's first phase of attack. And what I mean by that, punch with Chisora when Chisora first opens up with his shots, and then basically get out, spin out, back up, that sort of thing. Don't open up with Chisora and then stand there and continue to exchange. It's in the prolonged exchanges where Pulev can be outdone, kind of thing, and I don't think he'd be wise to sit there and trade with Chisora for a prolonged period of time. He needs to punch with Chisora, but only on his first phase of attack. Also, if I'm Kubrat Pulev, I would actually approach this fight relatively aggressively early on. Pulev can fight aggressively behind that jab, where he'll step forwards, he'll really step into the jab, and he'll look for his right hand behind it. And the reason I say that maybe it's a good idea to try and start this fight strong, is because, to me at least, if I'm analysing Chisora based off purely his last fight, I'd be very concerned from a Chisora perspective in regards to his punch resistance. To me, he really wasn't reacting well to many of those shots from Joseph Parker. He was dropped multiple times, he was hurt multiple times, and yeah, we've seen Chisora hurt before, we've seen him stopped before, but the way he was reacting to shots to me was a little bit concerning. So if I'm Pulev, I try to land something big early on to try and test those whiskers of Dereck Chisora. Derek's always been durable, but that last fight for me was a cause for concern in regards to Dereck Chisora. So if I'm Pulev, I would try to test that early on and see what happens. If nothing happens, then get on that boxing, get behind that jab, and try to be cautious, try to be safety first, and try to nullify Chisora. Try to quieten the crowd. If Chisora gets reckless, gets up close and tries to barrel in, try to tie him up, that sort of thing, just like the first fight. We know how Pulev's going to fight, really. There's not much point in me giving him a tactical plan. We know exactly what Pulev is about these days. And yeah, he needs to get on that jab and do his thing. But in regards to this fight, given where both guys are at in their careers, I actually find this one semi-hard to call. One thing about Pulev, he's coming in this fight with more activity. He actually fought in May against Jerry Forrest, who's a pretty good gatekeeper in the heavyweight division, and Pulev won that fight clearly. He looked relatively sharp for a 41-year-old. So maybe that activity gives Pulev an advantage going into this fight. But having said that, of course, this fight is in Chisora's backyard. I mean, I can see this fight going a whole host of different ways. I could see either guy getting stopped at this stage in their careers. I could see either guy winning an ugly points decision. I could see a gift decision in favour of Chisora. To me, there's many ways in which this fight can go. But for me, I'm going to go with Kubrat Pulev on points against Dereck Chisora. I was debating going Chisora on points, but I think I'll settle with Pulev in my opinion. Anyway, yeah, Pulev on points for me. What about you guys? How do you see this fight going? Share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Delboy. Peace.